We'll just go on. Barry Matherly, Board Chair, International Economic Development Council. Welcome here on stage. We have Nicolle, Graugnard, Senior Policy Manager, Trade and Investment, International Chamber of Commerce. Welcome. Githa Roelans, you've seen her before, Head of the Multinational Enterprise and Enterprise Engagement Unit of the ILO. And last but not least, someone you've seen before as well, Zhan from UNCTAD. Okay, not every chair has been attacked. Very good. Just take the last chair that's available. Fantastic. And through the panel, we have the moderator, CEO of WIPA, Zhan Skalar, and I'll hand over the stage to you, Zhan.
Thank you all for coming back to the room. I know it's hard, especially that nice weather outside, but we will try to be having interesting debate, so we will attract your attention. I hope so, at least. We will do our best. First, I would like to thank to all my, I would say, colleagues and even friends that joined here from all renowned organizations that are active in different parts of the investment promotion, facilitation, trade development, economic development. We will try to make it to show how SDGs matters and how this topic, inclusive investment, sustainable future, matters actually for IPAs. Let me shortly just introduce the panelists very briefly. So you will, the URSS already said, but let me say a couple of words. So Michael Gestrin, so at the end, is currently a senior economist in the investment division of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, so OECD. Before he was also economist with the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD. He has held research and teaching positions at the University of Oxford, ASSEC Business School, and the University of Toronto. So very shortly, welcome. Then we have a representative from UNIDO, Bernardo Calzadilla Sarmiento, Director, Department of Trade, Investment and Innovation. Before he was the Director of Trade Capacity Building. So we can see that they are circling around the organization, so they can bring the different kind of focus from one to another, and as well as a senior quality and standards expert. He also served as a former UNIDO deputy representative to the United Nations. Then we have from World Bank, Roberto Echandi, Investment Policy Global Lead of the Investment Climate Unit of the Trade and Competitiveness Global Practice of the World Bank Group. Prior joining the World Bank Group, he was the director of the Program on International Investment and the World Trade Institute of the University of Bern. He also was the chief negotiator of the Costa Rica to the negotiations of the association agreement between the European Union and Central America. So for more than a decade, he was the head Costa Rican delegations to multiple trade and investment bilateral and regional negotiations. So very experienced, and I believe he will contribute well. Then Barry Matherly came from US. He's serves as the chair of the International Economic Development Council, so IEDC, so also our consultative committee member, and is on the governance committee. Also served as of the executive board of the Economic Development Institute, the University of Oklahoma, and is chair of Alumni Scholarship Committee. Locally, Barry is a member of the Virginia Economic Developers Association and the Greater Richmond Association for Commercial Real Estate. I just came from their event in Cleveland. It was a great event. Almost 1,600 people joined, so all economic developers from all over the US. And we have Nicolle here from ICC, executive in charge of trade and investment policy. So Nicolle Graugnard is the senior policy manager in charge of trade and investment policy at the International. Since 2010, she has been responsible for the work program of the Global ICC Commission on Trade and Investment Policy. She also contributes to the Business 20 Task Force work on trade and investment to provide global business input into the rotating presidency agenda. And then we have Githa Roelans, is the head of the Multinational Enterprise and Enterprise Engagement Unit of the ILO, so International Labour Organization. This unit provides policy advice and technical support on the application of the principles of the ILO Tripartite Declaration concerning multinational enterprises and social policy to governments, employers and workers in ILO member states, and plays a central role in the ILO's engagement on FDI and operations of MNEs. Previously, she worked in the UNIDO Beijing office, China. So, last but not the least, my dear friend James Zhan is our also strategic advisor of WIPA. I believe more or less you all know him. He's a senior director of investment and enterprise at the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, shortly. He also leads the team that produces the United Nations Annual World Investment Report. He has rich hands-on experience, both at national and international level, in the areas of trade, investment, technology, business facilitation, and enterprise development, including directing policy research, international consensus building, and technical assistance to governments and institutions in over 160 countries. And also has a number of advisory positions with academia institutions, including Cambridge University, Columbia University, Oxford University, and University of Geneva. So welcome all. I will shortly try to introduce the topic. So steering towards sustainable FDI, as FDI as the main driver of SDGs. I prepared some text, but I would rather say from my heart, what we've been hearing today, it's we need to cooperate. We should not be competitors. So we should change our minds towards the sustainable FDI. Not any kind of FDI, but sustainable FDI. And this is the only way how we can put this sustainable FDI into Agenda 2030, into SDG agenda. We are aware that IPAs, the current, let's say, IPAs, are not really aware yet, not only IPAs. I believe we are all simply just searching for importance of SDGs. And we are not really sure if SDGs will work until 2030, if SDGs will really bring what we all strive to. So decreasing the poverty, improving the well-being of people, if I may say, decreasing inequalities. But we need to come together. We need to shake hands. We need to make partnership. We need to make a new investment promotion and facilitation narrative, as also James was saying before. Let's simply go to the session. So I will try to moderate it through the questions because we are very much short of time. I will simply try to make it interactive, and later I will also give you the floor, dear audience, to give some short questions. So I will ask to all of the panelists a very, it looks like simple question, but I believe it's not. I will ask you, let's say, 1-2 minutes each, please, to answer. So why sustainability? What is at stake? So please, just very shortly in 1-2 sentences. So maybe, Michael, you can start. Let's simply not complicate and go one by one. Thank you.
No? Now it is. Okay. Well, sustainability, I suppose, I would see it as a fairly broad term, and I think that it should be seen in broad terms. And really, I think what we're talking about here is you know, how do we attract quality investment by good corporate citizens? And we're not just talking about sustainability from an environmental perspective here, but from a business perspective. And I think for business to be sustainable, this has multiple dimensions. Business needs to be fair in terms of paying fair share of taxes, contributing to society in different ways, equitable in terms of inclusiveness of different elements of society, and then obviously there is the environmental sustainability dimension as well. And I think we're really talking about this package. And from this perspective, I think you know, this is really depending upon whether we succeed or not, this determines whether globalization becomes a sort of a nasty beast that we constantly have to fight, or whether globalization becomes a force for better societies and better lives.
Thank you. Barry, maybe from your perspective, you are more focused on economic development, but I believe it would be great to hear also from your point of view.
Sure. For me, in one word, it's competitiveness. Places that build their infrastructure in a sustainable way not only can invest now, but have the ability to invest in the future. And if you build your community in a sustainable practice, then the big thing is you'll be able to attract global talent. Because global talent is looking for sustainable communities that have a future. So once again, competitiveness.
Thank you. Nicolle, from the business perspective.
From the business, can you hear me? Is this working? Okay. I think for the context of business, it's essential that all actors in the economy, including government, intergovernmental bodies, businesses, civil societies, and consumers, view the balance of the three dimensions, economic, social, and environmental, as a shared responsibility. So for us, it would be enhancing the awareness of what entails sustainable development so that we can have the correct priority setting as we move forward in policy making.
Thank you very much. Roberto, from the World Bank.
To avoid repeating what my colleagues have said, I think that there's an additional dimension that we work a lot in the World Bank on this, and sustainability also happens through the political backing of society. We have to do a better job explaining to our civil society and our political actors why investment is good, why investment works, and when you have to use the right policies. We don't think, I will say something that might be controversial here, but this is the point of a debate. There's no such a thing as a bad investment. There's no good or bad investment. There are good or bad policies to deal with investors and investments. And that's where we're trying to work in the bank, have a more nuanced approach to different types of investments and different types of policy making to maximize the benefits.
Sure, the proper policies really matter. Githa, please, from the job creation perspective. Can you put a bit closer the microphone? Yeah. No, it's not. Maybe.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Well, for us, sustainability, I mean, it's very much what others were saying already with the three dimensions, economic, environmental, and social, get them rebalanced again, because what we've seen, I think, in the past is that they were not really imbalanced, and that certain elements got priority over others, meaning that there is a feeling overall that there hasn't been real shared benefits of globalization. And so when you start looking for sustainability, for us it very much means inclusiveness. And so when you talk about inclusive investment, it means also investments where no one is left behind. James this morning was mentioning how globalization probably has benefited 20% of the world. And what do we do with the 80%? So when we are going for sustainability, it means making sure that the other 80% is really included in policies we put in place, in behaviors that we try to stimulate, and in moving forward. Obviously, as was said again by many of the speakers this morning, putting job creation, and not just any kind of job creation, but really opportunities for decent incomes, decent working conditions where people do not die on the job, but really give opportunities for income generation so that people can lift themselves out of poverty and have a sustainable future.
Sure, thank you. Bernardo, now we come to industry.
Thank
Maybe
you very
industrial
much.
point of view.
First of all, let me acknowledge, I mean, it's very difficult to contribute to this debate after the wonderful speeches we had in the morning. They were so comprehensive. They gave us a lot of insight, and several of the issues were tackled. But for us, it's about the quality of life. At the end of the day, sustainability is an outcome. It's at the impact level. and it's about the quality of life for us and for the next generation. And in that sense, it is focused on people, but we also need to look into the planet, into prosperity, and this is where we come in. And in prosperity, what we look especially is to get the inclusiveness, to bring really the major player of the economy, and namely the SMEs, on board. It is, however, going beyond profit, and this I'm quoting from the speeches this morning, for the long term. Yeah, I think that this is important, that we need to learn to think more long term. I recently was visiting China during 2 weeks we had with our DG meetings, and I was impressed that in every meeting with an association or whatever we talked, they were talking about Horizon 2040, Horizon 2050. We need to learn this long-term thinking. And just to complement, the SDGs, they have the 5 key elements, namely people, planet, prosperity, as well as peace, yeah? And the last one, which you addressed already, is partnership. And I think peace is a very important element to enable prosperity, to enable us to reach the sustainable development. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. James, please.
Thank you very much. I think everything has been said. I know Mike and Nicolle emphasized the business side, the responsibility side, while Githa and Bernardo emphasized on the development side. So basically, it should be both. I would say sustainability or sustainable investment implies that we need responsible investment are responsible for the society. That's the responsibility side. And the second is that that contribute to sustainable development, poverty alleviation, so to speak. Then for the first, we often talk about the ESG issues, environmental, social, and governance issues. And on the second part, what we use at UNCTAD, we call invest in the poor, for the poor, and with the poor. That's the investment, the second part of the contribution part. That investment that produce goods and services that are affordable and accessible by the poor. That is for. With, meaning that investment need to crowd in domestic investment, crowd in SMEs rather than crowd them out. For the poor, I already mentioned accessible festival. So that is the 2 dimensions I would like to put in. And just more of repeating what the other says and summarizing.
I believe it's very important because the poor means a lot, I believe, in these days. And especially in this region, we are facing a lot of troubles with, and the people are suffering. And I believe your point is very good. Now I will try, since we are in a shortage of time, try to gather 2 of the questions, and I will read them both and also ask you very short. Are we really correct in our understanding that sustainable investments are a great enabler of SDGs? If it's so, to what extent? And you already a bit said, how has your organization contributed towards sustainable investments, and what was the key lessons learned? So please try to combine these 2 questions. So maybe I can start with James now simply, and we go backwards.
Okay. I thought I said whatever.
Try to say something new.
That's right. I think in our World Investment Report 2014, we came up with an action plan for investing in sustainable development goals. There are 6 sets of actions that we need to take, not only from the perspective of investment promotion, but also in terms of policies, regional collaboration. The first is really to have a new generation of investment policy framework that is conducive to sustainable development and sustainable investment for sustainable development. That includes reforming the international investment regimes. As we know, there's no multilateral investment regime while there's multilateral trading and the multilateral monetary system. But there is international investment regime consists of 3,300 investment treaties. It's a highly fragmented regime. But if you survey this regime, you can see that the majority of the treaties do not have sustainable development elements in its preamble, in its substantive provisions, and in its implementation dimensions. So over 90% of the existing treaties do not have that. It's only the new generation of treaties have that. So there's an agenda for reform of international investment regime, make it conducive to sustainable development, number one. Number two, there's an issue of, at the national policy level, we need to mainstream sustainable development into the investment policies at the national level, and also mainstream sustainable development into the investment policies. So there's two in mainstreaming. That's the policy dimension. Secondly, investment promotion facilitation. I mentioned the transformation of the investment promotion agencies to make that as a kind of sustainable development project development agencies, all to have a unit designated in the investment promotion agencies for sustainable development projects. Bankable projects is a big bottleneck for promoting investment in sustainable development. And the third dimension is investment incentives. For the time being, incentives are location-bound, or it's location-driven incentives. It is icing on the cake, not effective, but it's also wasteful. What we need is to link to sustainable development contribution, meaning that incentives to award investment that create jobs that contribute to environmental and social development of the countries. So we need to come up with indicators, and investment incentive schemes should be formulated towards that direction. The third dimension is regional collaboration. We know that in the poverty region areas, in poor countries, the market is small. And to enlarge the market, regional collaboration, regional industrial, joint industrial projects, or infrastructure projects, they have to be regional-based rather than national-based. So regional collaboration becomes very important. The fourth one is to change the business mindset, starting with business education. In the past, in all these business schools, including an UNCTAD in the past, when we talk about investment locations, when we teach the business students, we say, if you want to invest, you look into the investment determinants. Fantastic policy framework, excellent infrastructure, first-class business facilitation. And then we are encouraging all the business going into developed countries, into the advanced countries where infrastructure and investment climates are the best. But how are we going to encourage people, business people, to go to the poverty-ridden areas, to go to the governance-weak areas, and to do the poverty alleviation? So there's a change of mindset of the business, starting with the new generation of business people, teaching them, equip them with the skills to do business in the poor, with the poor, and for the poor. So we also need to change the financial market incentives to change the, if you look at the current regulations in the financial market, there's a general feeling it's an over-regulation. A lot of emphasis on the fiduciary accountability, responsibility. They are very important, but sometimes we need to bear in mind investing in the poor, we're investing in the areas where risk-return profile is not ideal. So sometimes fund managers need to go out of their way to do business with the risk in those areas. So we need to find financial incentives to encourage them to go to SDG sectors. I think I've talked too much.
No, it's fine, it's
Thank
fine.
you.
We are pretty much quick since it's obvious that you are all very well experienced. So, Bernardo, what about in the industrial sector? Is it really going on well. Are we on the correct path? Because UNIDO, as far as I learn now from our cooperation, you are pretty down to the earth. You are very much practical. So please try to say a couple of words about this.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I wanted to start saying sustainable investment for industrialization can only happen if public and private sector are coordinated and can work along the same direction. We need also to think that in order to develop, to industrialize, we need to link up to access the global value chain, whether they are very global or only value chain. We need to help, and this I said already, to SMEs and local economy to link up. Basically, the notion I would like to put in the middle is linkages, building linkages and partnerships. So we have, in that regard, developed an approach, which is the program for country partnerships. And when we talk about partnerships, we have to think there has to be still leadership. There has to be very clear ownership, and in that regard, the program for country partnership that UNIDO is promoting, especially in Ethiopia, Senegal, and now in Peru, it counts very much on, first of all, government ownership, alignment of all what we do with the national plans. Secondly, with the building of a multi-stakeholder partnership that involves as well the development finance institutions, as well as the UN system. And finally, to do a joint resource mobilization, having a multidisciplinary approach, because as much as UNIDO can do, as much as the UN can do, we will not reach any impact if we do not manage to mobilize the local investment, the government decisions. Sometimes the policy does not require investment, but it is instrumental to the investment. So I would like to just say that UNIDO is working with a strong concept of partnership building, but under a clear leadership of the government. Thank you.
Thank you. Since you mentioned now government ownership, Githa, how do you think, let's say, from your point of view for the decent job creation, are the governments aware of this importance that they own the projects, let's say, of SDGs? Are they aware of it? How important are all these sustainable development goals?
Well, at least let me focus on one of the sustainable development goals that is a crucial one for us, for the ILO, which is SDG 8, which puts together, at the one hand, economic growth, productive employment, and decent work. And I think it's a very interesting SDG because it puts together economic growth, productive employment, and decent work, as I was saying, together. So it's not seen as you cannot have economic growth and you can have decent work. So actually all of them go hand in hand. And I think increasingly working with governments, there is an enormous need to create decent jobs. And it can be done through putting in place, of course, employment policies, but even, how are you going to stimulate really job creation? For that, you need to look at what are the opportunities, what does investment bring, whether it's foreign investment, and we were talking about, I like that very much about, you have foreign investment, you have domestic investment, you have direct investment, indirect investment, the business linkages, and it's looking at the whole picture, how all of these different elements can actually stimulate job creation, and what then as a government you also need to do to facilitate that process. So it's looking at what kind of active labor market policies you need to have, the kind of vocational skills development programs you need to have, just basic education, preparing young people for entering a labor market, and as well as SME entrepreneurship development, because a lot of the jobs are created not directly via multinational enterprises, but actually by SMEs. But how do you then stimulate those linkages between the local SMEs and the multinationals coming into a country? So it's looking at all of these different elements, how they can contribute to decent.
Are there any linkages already between SMEs and, let's say, bigger guys?
I think there are many linkages, but there are barriers also sometimes to getting those linkages. And very often it's because the SMEs either do not produce it up to the quality level that is required by some of the multinationals, or the capacity is just not there. And I think as part of the commitment also from business to the Sustainable Development Goals, and I'm sure Nicolle will talk about that, it's also important, it's not just about what government has to do, but it's also how do you closer align actually the private sector with their role in development. And for that, yes, we need a different behavior, I think, from business as well, for them also to embrace sustainable development. And that sustainable development is good for business because it will also contribute, as Bernardo was saying, it will contribute to peace. And for any company operating in the world, I think operating in countries where there is rule of law, where there is peace, where there is real opportunities for inclusive development, it is actually very good for business as well. And it creates a lot of opportunities for jobs, and it is closely aligning public sector with these global goals, national development priorities, and decent work priorities. So I think there's a huge potential. We are very pleased as ILO to be able to participate in these meetings now on investment. And I think it is the SDGs that are really bringing us together. And we really thank WIPO also for bringing us all together here in this forum and highlighting how all these different elements of sustainable development can be brought together and how investment is really a very important component of getting to sustainable development.
I must be very honest, I will confess something, that there are many different organizations. They all strive for the same goal, but many times they are in the parallel roads. Why we as WIPA brought them here actually? To try to put even more linkages between them. Because we believe that we can be much, much more stronger. If sometimes in Geneva, for example, they are maybe 100 meters away, they have very similar goals, but maybe they don't have time to speak, or institutional organization prevents them. So I believe that this kind of forums can help to this, to bridge this kind of distance among the organizations. Roberto, World Bank is one of the biggest influencers, of course, opinion leader, and please, from your perspective, in a really global manner.
Yes, in our case, we are focusing, I would like to share with you a very innovative approach that we're taking. The World Bank has been doing lending and continues to do lending and technical assistance, but we started a program 3 years ago, not focusing on what has to be done, because a lot of the governments are clear. The question is how. The question is how you make it sustainable, how do you, and how to measure. So we started to work on a program that what we do is basically go and devise concrete reforms that governments have to take together with participation of the private sector. We see investment as a relationship, by the way, civil society, business, and governments together. And what to do according to political cycles, and I emphasize this because administrations change, investment outlives governments. So what to do, but not only what to do, what kind of reforms, is what can be done in those political cycles, and here's the catch, how to measure the impact of everything that is done. And this is important because what gets measured gets done. If you don't measure things, you never know. Actually, you can have very good ideas, but you don't know if it's working. So what we have to do is to develop a framework, basically combining all these ideas that we hear today, trying to have a way in that could have a discourse to engage with policymakers in a very short period of time. Ministers and presidents do not have hours to read long books. They have to have very clear language techniques to go to the point. And then we then came with a framework of 3 key basic ideas. One, when we talk about investment policy and promotion, we shouldn't divide them. We should talk about both of them, to integrate it. Second, it's not about choosing between FDI or domestic investment. It's about connecting them for all the reasons that we have been saying, linkages and transfer of technology. 3, not all investment FDI or NEMS, but in particular FDI, is the same. We can no longer, if we want to be serious and want to get impact on the ground, we cannot continue talking about the policies on mining that are the same, or treating investment as it was the same. Mining is not the same as hotels, it's not the same as restaurants, it's not the same as airspace factory. We need a framework for how to differentiate that is simple enough for policymakers to make change, but more nuanced to know what are the impacts, because the impacts of different investments are different. The environmental impact, the social impact, the implications tend to be different. And last but not least, if we talk about investment, we should no longer only stick with investment attraction. A lot of governments and even some of colleagues, even in the bank, so for a long time, thought that if you just attract investment, bring it, everything else will happen automatically. That's not the case. You need policies. That's why our team is called investment policy. And this is interesting. This is the World Bank speaking, right? It's no longer the laissez-faire only. We're talking about now a more active policies for this. And then we go beyond attraction. I think attraction is one, in this relationship of investments, private sector, governments, and civil society, there's a phase of attraction of investment. There's an area of enabling the investor to entry. We have data that shows how come in a developing country in Southeast Asia, I won't say the name, but that depends on tourism, 70% of all the investors who want to enter the country cannot enter because the government doesn't prevent them to enter. And yet, there's this discourse that you need the investment. Okay, but that's not only enough. The entry then goes to the retention phase. We have this data that shows that 25% of all the investment that goes into developing countries and economies in transition stops expanding or leaves the countries because of problems of regulatory government conduct, political risks that are generated by agencies and government themselves. How come if governments want to attract investment, how is that happening? Well, because governments are not monolithic, because governments have many agencies, and not always, all the time, they talk among themselves. But this is a very important point, 1/4. 1/4 is lost. And last but not least, linkages, which I agree with all of them. And in each of these four areas, attraction, entry, retention, and linkages, we have indicators to measure which particular policies are working. So we have the indicator of investment generated for entry. We have for incentives that we work on in locational incentives as well as behavioral incentives. We have indicators of cost-benefit optimization to see if the money is actually going to the right place. 3, we have the indicator of cost savings of procedures. What are the gains for government and for investors of streamlining procedures? And 4, an indicator of investment retention and expansion. And last but not least, very important, on linkages in type of jobs. We already made the research that shows what different types of investment generates different value added in jobs per social strata. So we can say, for example, that if you are in agriculture, certain percentage of jobs will go for low income, another percentage to middle income, another to high income, and that changes by economic activity. So all this data, we're trying to use it in such a way that we have toolkits to enable governments find their own recipe, their own policy, because each country is unique. And despite this half of this Lego approach or this modular approach, try to find their own, help the governments to achieve their own recipe and measure the impact according to these political cycles that we measure.
Thank you. I hope that the governments are aware of this and that they would really implement as soon as possible what you prepared.
2 years ago, we have 81 right now.
Oh, good.
In 2 years, we have from 5 to 81. So I think it's important.
Good, good. Nicolle, from the business perspective.
Yes, thank you. I think your first question was, are we correct in understanding that investment is necessary as a greater enabler of SDGs? And obviously the Addis Action Agenda rightly signified trade and investment as potential policy tools that can be used towards achieving the SDGs. James's outfit has definitely done some great quantitative analysis and understanding that we have an annual investment gap of 2.5 trillion to realize the 2030 goals. However, I think that number might be a little underestimated because it's not taking into account the rebuilding of existing infrastructure in developed countries. And some analysis indicates that for water infrastructure alone in developed countries, plus Brazil, Russia, India, and China, it's going to be about 770 billion to 1 trillion. So, and that's only in water. So we have some major financing hurdles to overcome if we're actually serious about achieving these SDGs. Now, knowing that, we understand that the private sector is a necessary partner in realizing these goals because governments cannot cover these costs. They're astronomical. So what do we know about the private sector? We know that they have 27 trillion in cash holdings worldwide, in FDI holdings worldwide, and we also know that now they have over, I think, 4.4 trillion in cash holdings, excess cash holdings, which are well above pre-crisis levels. For some reason, companies are holding back. We can talk about uncertainty of markets, predictability, things like that. So from the private sector initiative, what do we need?
Does this mean that there is a lot of cash around, but they are not sure if they should spend it for this agenda?
Yes. Yes. Well, I think it's just lack of confidence in the global economic situation today due to many things, and I think James could probably speak to this a little bit better than I could. However, what I would say from the private sector side, what we are doing is in the guidelines on international investment, which both understand the rights but also the responsibilities of the three main stakeholders, that being the investor, the home country, and the host country. These were ICC first introduced these in 1949. We updated them in 1972. And then again in 2012, we updated them representing 40 years of knowledge that we had gained on the ground. Just recently, this year, we reintroduced a new edition, which is kind of our Sustainable Development Edition, which properly contextualizes these guidelines, which are basically a checklist for all three stakeholders. They're non-binding, but places those within the SDG context. And on the business side, what we are willing to do and what we've noted, and in many of our multi-stakeholder dialogues as we look at international investment agreement regime reform, is that people just don't understand that we do have a new chapter on corporate responsibility. We do go farther than many governments in really taking part of ascribing to the ILO Declaration on the Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work. We have a chapter on anti-corruption, which definitely references the OECD anti-bribery convention and the UN Convention Against Corruption. And on corporate responsibility, we have the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. So this is our effort to enter into these dialogues as we look at reform and becoming a positive and constructive partner in realizing the SDGs.
Right. Barry, you are involved, actually, you are kind of in a special position, kind of private and public. So maybe from this perspective, you can see from the, let's say, bigger picture, is it really a linkage between private and public? Is there any dialogue? And do the businesses really understand the importance of SDGs, or we might just say sustainability?
I think there definitely is. In the U.S. alone, investment funds that focus on sustainability, green, and ethical investing are right about $4 trillion, just in the U.S. And so those are funds that 20 years ago, no one would even talk about that type of investing in the U.S. So the money is there and is growing over the years. I think the public sector is trying to build the awareness. On the public sector side at the International Economic Development Council, what we find is that at the local and regional level, people want to become part of it, they just don't know how. And so we provide a lot of training, a lot of research, starter kits to get communities involved. We have 10 advisory committees that advise our policy group. Sustainability is one of the 10. And so we look at that very seriously, but not as an isolated thing. I think the big thing is that it just needs to be woven into everything we do. And so another example is I'm an instructor and a board member at the Economic Development Institute, which is kind of a postgraduate training for economic developers. And there, in the track, if you're going to manage an economic development organization, you have to take a class on sustainability so that leadership knows what the topic is and they're prepared to deal with it from a leadership perspective. That class wasn't even part of the curriculum 5 years ago. So I think you do have on both sides the public sector gaining investment momentum, being very, in some cases, very aggressive in putting money in. But at the same time, needing partners on the public side that have the right policies and the right environment created that will be able to grow these investments so that they work together.
I might say that when I was in Cleveland, I saw this commitment of the business sector, actually. I was saying how WIPA is struggling to get the budget, even maybe from private sector, but there I saw a great example how the budget structure works perfectly. So the people from the business are really committed. Even NASA came there and set their commitments, how they would like to benefit, to contribute to the sustainable development. So I believe this is a great example that we should all follow. So we should also restructure the model of financing. Please, from OECD perspective, Michael.
Hello. In terms of the first question, I would obviously completely agree that sustainable investment is a great enabler of the SDGs, but we'd go even further and say that it's really a precondition, because if it's not sustainable investment, then I don't think we really have much of a hope on the SDGs. In terms of the OECD approach to this issue, much like what Nicolle just mentioned, we try to take a balanced approach. The OECD is a place where we develop intergovernmental instruments. Some of these are binding, some are less binding, but basically these are multilateral instruments that governments abide to, they sign on to, and they commit to these instruments. So for example, on the one side, to open up for investment, we have instruments like the Codes of Liberalization and the National Treatment Instrument. These are instruments that are they aim to do one thing, they aim to get more investment. But then to balance that out, on the other side, we have the instruments that are meant to make that investment work better for the societies in which it takes place. And this is where you find instruments such as the guidelines for multinational enterprises, our policy framework for investment, and then more recently the due diligence guidance, and then obviously our instruments on anti-corruption are key in this respect. And then a final, somewhat a different type of point is that the OECD is the guardian for one of the main definitions for how we measure foreign direct investment. And in the work that we're doing on this definition of foreign direct investment is that we're pushing governments to broaden the way that they measure foreign direct investment so that we start capturing not just the amount of investment, but so that we start getting some hard numbers on what this investment is contributing in the countries where it's taking place. So for example, we're measuring the income that's generated by foreign direct investment, and we try to follow that income to see who's actually who's making the money and where's the money going from foreign direct investment. And also we're starting work on trying to measure job creation and other social dimensions of foreign direct investment in our work on the statistics, because we feel that it's very difficult for governments to formulate enlightened policy that will, and for IPAs obviously as part of this whole process, that will get us towards the SDGs through sustainable investment. Without this better empirical understanding, we're sort of in the dark.
One question more for you, Michael. Due to all these geopolitical changes and the threats of terrorism and everything, do you think governments has really the time to focus onto this, although they understand most possibly that investments are crucial to overcome these difficulties? Are they really focused onto this and all these details, to where the money will go, to measure how it will be spent?
Well, fortunately in our case, the answer is yes. And as the Deputy Prime Minister was saying, I mean, there's the short term and then there's the long term, and I think it behooves us to sort of really try to keep an eye on the long term, and I suppose what I'm seeing on my side is that the agencies that are dealing with statistics don't disappear. They continue to come to the meetings. Countries that are undergoing troubles are showing up at investment committee meetings at the OECD, and the specialists are still on the ground, still doing their jobs, and so we keep on pushing this agenda, knowing that at some point, hopefully things will be calmer and we'll have a more peaceful global situation.
Thank you very much. Nicolle, can we go to you, for example, maybe concretely, if you can say, how can the business sector really contribute to this Agenda 2030? And as far as I know, it's we visited one, I believe 9,000 or even more companies committed to SDGs, and even in some of the companies I saw they are having it in their facades actually. We commit to this and this SDG. Is this only marketing, or is it really the real intention?
I think we were talking about this last night, but I think we need to somewhat think of, and I have 3 points I want to make, but just as a kind of a chapeau, I think we need to look at companies not as these beings that exist outside of society, but actually populated by decision makers and workers that have families that live in society. And so I think there's this understanding that there is this shared responsibility among all of us. These companies don't take decisions within vacuums, and as the concept of sustainable development is somewhat permeating throughout society, that is registering, I think, more and more with senior executives and maybe employees that will be moving up the management ladder. With that being said, I do think that we need to communicate the concept of sustainable development a little bit better. And in that regard, ICC has developed the Business Charter for Sustainable Development. It's in its 3rd edition that was released in 2015. It was first started in 1991, and it's specifically designed at the individual company level as an accessible starting point where businesses can start developing sustainability strategies. And this is particularly important for SMEs in developing countries, so that if we want these linkages by multinational enterprises, which basically coordinate, I think, 80% of all global value chains. However, those global value chains are populated by, it depends on the region, but very much by small and medium-sized enterprises. They need to have these sustainability strategies already in place so that they are able to link in with the larger M&E coordinated global value chains. So that is one of our efforts, is just really at the very basic company level to get them attuned to sustainable development, triple bottom line concepts. Beyond that, ICC is also, when we talk about the Global Compact, there is something also called the Global Business Alliance for 2030, and ICC was the coordinating organization for many business organizations, ranging from the regional, global, sectoral, national, with companies ranging from multinationals to SMEs throughout the world in shared vision of these market-based solutions towards realizing the SDGs. And we have been working with the UN intergovernmental bodies in every step of the way and understanding what the private sector is doing and will continue to do as an active partner in realizing the SDGs.
So obviously there is a strong will to contribute, but agenda should be put into the place. I believe they should understand what they can do. So obviously they don't know how to invest their own money. It looks like this. But I'm glad that you are doing a great job, actually, at least to try to explain to them
Yes, and I think working with increasing collaboration and our working relationship with WIPA may help us on the ground throughout. We're located in 130 countries and represent about 6.5 million companies. So getting those linkages, it seems to be the word of the day, but increasing those linkages I think may be beneficial in allowing this concept to permeate at a very concrete level.
We are glad to have you all on board, not just on this stage, but on board, actually. Bernardo, so I know that there are some countries that you can maybe cite as a good examples for being able to promote and attract sustainable, inclusive industrial investments. And maybe you can elaborate through your goal 9 that you are following as a UNIDO.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think I mentioned already the PCP approach, and we are deploying in countries like Senegal. But a concept that we didn't touch yet, I would like to bring on board is the geography of production. Yeah, the geography of production is the entry point for the PCP approach, in the sense that we are looking how can we integrate. And today, the geography of production is that production is happening to global value chains. But this morning, the Deputy Prime Minister, he mentioned technological development, innovation, robotics, 3D. So this all, the technological changes, will bring a complete new landscape for the geography of production, which we need to take into account. So our concept of the PCPs is good for today, but maybe it is not the right concept for tomorrow, in the idea that the SDGs are a conceptual developmental framework for 2030. But where is technology going to be in 2030? I think very wisely you have a panel in this afternoon, and maybe this will lead to an introduction.
Maybe they will answer these questions. Let's hope.
Another point I would like to make, because I already mentioned our work in Ethiopia, is that indeed I agree that for investment to be sustainable, it has to be socially responsible. But this is not enough. I don't think that being a good citizen is a condition that is enough. It is maybe necessary, but it is not sufficient, because I take always, and Roberto mentioned, we have to distinguish between the sectors. Recently I think it was in Vienna, during the conference that Ted Moran mentioned that investment in mining in Peru is a good example of quality FDI. I wouldn't agree to that, because even if this company is investing in mining, is following ISO 14000 standards, is paying for the school, is paying for the hospital, is building some playgrounds, this doesn't mean that precisely what we have said, this linkage to the local economy. And you can only have a developmental impact if there is development and there is inclusion. So we are back to the concepts that we have been talking about, inclusion and linkage. Only if they happen, there can be development. FDI can happen also without them.
Yeah. One short additional question. So how important is sectorial prioritization for the governments?
I think this is fundamental, and especially I think that if we are talking about investment promotion, we have to be selective. And precisely, if I use back the concept or the example of Ethiopia, we started by promoting investment in the textile sector. This was still an easy job, because what you do in the textile sector, you are importing the garment, we are doing a sort of a maquila, and you are re-exporting. Yeah. Then we moved into the leather sector, creating leather city, etc. But here we start with a linkage. They have a lot of cattle. We are bringing in the local economy. Now, the last effort we are doing is on the agro-industry. Last week we had the agro-industrial investment promotion forum there. And this is much more complex, because if you have an industrial park, and at the center of what UNIDO is doing is to promote industrial parks as a tool, as a driver, eco-industrial parks, then you need to make sure that the suppliers are able to deliver in the right quality and the right quantity. Maybe they can deliver in the right quantity, but to deliver in the right quality, is a challenge and needs a lot of effort and a lot of assistance, be it by national institutions, be it by international cooperation.
Thank you. How does the future look like, Roberto? I mean, what we've been listening now, can we course correct and stop the exploitation of natural resources, people, decrease the poverty for our future generations? It's a very tough question, but...
I wish I had a crystal ball and all the wisdom to answer that. No, I think that what I would like just to emphasize, and I think that there's a consensus here in the panel, is that when we talk about this investment in sustainability, one issue is the gap, right? The quantitative dimension, but also the most important is the qualitative dimension. We made, this research, and we live in a very paradoxical world, right? We have never had less poor people in the planet than today. Mm-hmm. We have never had less poor people. Yet, the gap between rich and poor is increasing. So we have, in 1776, when Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations, the gap between the richest and the poor was 4 times. Today is 400. So in a global economy, in a global world, is that sustainable? Of course not. But then that opens the eyes that it's not only then, the investment is not then about the money, it's about the transforming the type of goods and services that we produce and the processes by which we do it. The know-how is very important. And here, I would like to close with this idea that I said it in the morning in a workshop. We made a research in the bank because every time we talk about knowledge and these kind of things, typically everybody says, okay, we have to educate more and have better education, which is totally true. Mind you, the devil is in the details. We made a research showing whether there was a correlation between the number of years of schooling and productivity. And it's not always a case on point. A lot of countries have increased the years of schooling, and yet the productivity is not increasing, in particular in developing countries. Yet, in those countries that have been able to understand how to harness private sector and dynamism and research, the productivity is increasing exponentially. Thailand is one case in point, for example. So the point that I want to make here is that we discovered that the knowledge is transferred not automatically from people to people. We're human beings. We learn by doing. The technological knowledge of how to make this device, right? I can be an engineer and go to university and have a degree, but I will not learn how to make this device if I don't work together with someone that does it, and then that's human beings learn. My point here is that investment is the new school. The enterprise is the new school. And that's a very important point, because then that means that the issue is not whether you want investment or not, it's how, what type of investment, how you use it, and how you measure the real benefits. But that's kind of a groundbreaking, because for a long time, when we went to governments, there was this dilemma. Should we want domestic investment, foreign investment, good? But no. It's about connection. The linkages come only through that way. So am I optimistic on that? The answer is yes. Let me tell you, when I see countries like Honduras that used to depend on coffee and bananas, actually bananas, almost everything, and now they are exporting components for cars. When I see countries like my own, Costa Rica, in 1986, we used to depend on, again, coffee and bananas. Today we export basically services, microchips, and medical devices. And we have received 20% of our population in immigrants, more than the EU and the US combined. And before the crisis, we had a 3% of unemployment. And that had a lot to do with investment. So am I optimistic? The answer is yes. I think that the key is how to go to the nitty-gritty in a very concrete way and work together, private sector, governments, and civil society, in understanding all these trends that we all have mentioned here today.
Thank you. James, okay, you spoke about the narrative, new narrative before. Can you just add a bit more about, let's say, facilitation and aftercare? So maybe how aftercare, maybe if you can focus, how important is aftercare?
Okay, this aftercare, I think Roberto mentioned earlier about investment retention, the challenge of retention. is an important challenge. We know that a large part of the investments are basically footloose. And then there's a question how to create the stickiness of the investment. And that's also very tricky because countries are also afraid that they will get stuck into the certain segment of this global production network, which is called global value chain. They want to upgrade. They want to move in terms of product upgrade, process upgrade, and even chain upgrade, from producing radio to producing TV set, from producing TV sets to producing mobile phones. So all these upgrading, the whole thing of retention, upgrading is a kind of the dynamics policymakers need to grab and to master, and investment promotion agencies have an important role on that. So if we see this, what we call the flying geese pattern of industrial restructuring, moving from higher cost to lower cost of locations, that this started in Asia, from Japan to advanced Asian countries like Singapore, Taiwan province of China, Hong Kong, and then the small tigers like Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and then later on there was a massive movement to China, and later on to India, to Vietnam. Now it's moving further to South Asia. In particular, we see that Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka attracting more and more investment. We see in Southeast Asia that Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos attracting huge amount of investment flowing out of China and the beginning flowing out of India, from Vietnam. Labor-intensive industries, export-oriented, efficiency-seeking FDI. We see these trends. It's difficult to stop that. Then the question is not just to retain them, but to upgrade. Upgrading, which is very important. Upgrading the products and the process, and particularly upgrading the value chains. So this investment intention, retention concept should be developed into upgrading. At least upgrading is part of that. That means investment promotion agencies will not only continue to provide first-class services to the investors to solve the problems, including preventing disputes, which is very important, not to wait until the disputes is already reached the stage. They have to go to International Arbitration Tribunal where the country's image has been damaged, and it takes a lot of time and it's very costly. So there are a number of things that the investment promotion agencies can do. But thinking of longer term, upgrading is important, the narrative. Make it more dynamic than static. I think that Ismail is sending you the time card, so I just stop here.
No, they are asking me to come in front of the camera, you know, so, but I'm already in the front of the camera, so no problem. Githa, James was saying now that it's important to upgrade, and all this is connected also to jobs. So if we keep them, if we persuade them that they should invest more, maybe not just vertically but also horizontally into different sectors, and then this means creation of new jobs locally, so in the local market. Do you think it's important, this job creation, and also I believe education matters here, that you can upgrade them? So maybe from this point of view you can elaborate a bit.
Well, I think there are a number of really interesting elements that come out from the different panel discussions, as well as the speeches this morning. Education, yes, plays a key role. Vocational skills trainings plays a very important role, but it's also for governments to identify where are the opportunities of the future. And one of the speakers this morning was talking about green jobs, about also jobs that are related to the new technologies. And I think for governments, that is actually really important, because a lot of the governments that we still see are, when it comes to vocational skills training, it is to this lower or in the traditional manufacturing, and it's not enough looking for the opportunities of the future. And technology, can have a disruptive effect on labor markets, but it also offers a lot of opportunities. For that, you also need entrepreneurship development. You need people seeing where the opportunities are, and then via those linkages, and I think the Costa Rica example, we've heard it a couple of times. I mean, it is indeed through investment, but also because the right policies were in place, the skills development programs were put in place by the government, the SME development, the linkages programs. So there was a lot of support from the government through its policies of making the most out of this investment to transform Costa Rica, provide more job opportunities. And you mentioned it's not only for the Costa Rica workers themselves, but even allowing for migrant workers to find a lot of opportunities in Costa Rica. But it is a combination of forward-looking, and we haven't talked here about the skills mismatch, what we often see in countries as well, even countries where you have high educational levels, and I'm not going to give names of countries, but where you have a high number of people with university degrees, but unfortunately not in the sectors where there is opportunity for economic development and where investment might be coming in. So how do you actually, as a government, also from the beginning, start up this kind of dialogue with investors coming in, identifying where the jobs of the future will be needed? And a number of research that we've done, especially in a number of post-crisis countries that were opening up again for investment, was precisely through these interviews that we did with important investors, was to identify what are the kind of jobs you will be creating in 5 years' time, later on, so that we could facilitate a dialogue with ministries to make sure that the people got the right skills and would be able to find the jobs where they are. And that is an important shift, probably, that needs to happen in quite a number of countries, but also a shift among many of young people, because also in a number of countries, a lot of them are still trying to find government jobs, employment, and they also should start looking far more for opportunities in the private sector, and not just waiting for a job to happen or to come to them, but also see where are the opportunities as an entrepreneur to develop. And again, the accompanying policies that are needed and the public-private dialogues that are needed to get there.
Thank you. I suggest that we take, since we are really running out of time, it was a joke before, of course, about camera, but can we take 3 questions from the audience and we simply conclude? I will ask you later just to shortly answer and maybe give 1 sentence crucial message that you would like to send to our members, to IPAs, because really in 10 minutes we should finish. So please, if we have a microphone and any questions, I would appreciate. Please, you have the opportunity. You have the top guys here on the stage. Just ask them. Don't be afraid. They will answer. I'm sure they can answer in a good manner. Okay, then I'll have...
Sorry?
There is, okay.
Okay. Initially, I would like to thank you for your nice presentations to inform us regarding the conjunctural happenings in the world. I appreciate all your presentations, and I would like to forward a very crucial question to Roberto from the World Bank, actually. We all know the fact that they closely cooperate with FED, but it's a well-known fact that, FED has been issuing United States dollars not against gold as of 1972. And also the power holders of US have already moved their funds to the east, as they are aware of the fact that there is paradigm shift, power paradigm shift from west to east. They moved their funds already to China, Singapore, to Hong Kong and Malaysia. In this respect, the power holders who moved their funds out of United States of America, they wanted to, control China with their media and, investment and trade. But the Chinese Politburo, didn't want such a blockage. In this respect, would these, and the Chinese guys want their money back, the debts back from US, would this blockage from the Chinese Politburo, create a blockage against sustainable development and global governance? And what could be the effects? This is Zhan from New Turkey magazine from Turkey. Thank you, Roberto.
Thank you very much for the question. Roberto, please.
Let me just say that you're totally right in the sense that we're living in a more complex world, and sure, there is a gravitation. The traditional Eurocentric culture that the world has had for a long time is evolving. I think that's a very positive development. I think that it's complex, but I think that China today is one of the, the second economy in the planet. When I mentioned before that a significant number of poor people have actually left poverty, a lot has to do also with China. 200 million or plus people. So I think that, to be honest, even, let me share with you, even publicly, the Chinese experience is giving us light in different dimensions, even in the World Bank. We have this, I think it has shown that, there are no traditional orthodox, or the Washington consensus that for a long time used to be preached by the bank. Even within the bank, now we have a more nuanced approach. So to be honest, I think that the emergence of China is a reality, but I think it's a positive one. It's a positive one. We need a multipolar world. I think that the challenge that we have, and I will finish with this phrase, it was one that a professor of mine once told me, talking about the institution and the world governance. And they were commenting about this anecdote that in the Bretton Woods, there was Winston Churchill talking with Truman. And they say, well, listen, we already, we won the war. But now the most difficult part will be to win the peace. And I think that's a very wise message today. And even elaborating on the message that the Deputy Prime Minister said today, that's one of the challenges we have. And part of our roles of our international organizations is to be very pragmatic, very grounded, but also keep that governance and that dimension clear in our sight, because I think that we will have to do a lot of adjustment to world governance. And all these reactions against globalization is part of that also reaction of civil society to what is going on. Now, it's our job to actually explain, and that's why I made that point before, to explain better to the civil society through entities like IPAS and to governments as well. And WIPA has a key role to play, that the well-being, as my colleagues here were saying, of people depend not to fight globalization, but how to better manage it. We have to learn how to manage it. And I think that's where I see the future going. Learn how to manage the reality that we have here. I had also a friend when I was based in Brussels that used to tell me in the European Parliament that to fight globalization was equally effective as to fight the laws of gravity. That it would be much better to learn how to manage it. And I think I really would like to emphasize that point today.
So it's good that we have all these big guys here to empower our members, IPAs. Obviously, they really play a crucial role to shape the sustainable future. Please, 2 more questions, but be very sharp and very short, because we will really need to finish. Please, gentlemen there. Can you bring the microphone?
Bastian, I have the microphone here. Maybe I start with a question and then put it over there.
But please, just question.
It's a very short question.
No comments, just question.
No. Thanks to Roberto for building the bridge back from the geopolitical situation to something specific. We're here to hear something about the huge potential on sustainable development. And what I hear is very macro, and I would like you to also offer solutions that are very specific and actually help to come from a value proposition side to value delivery. How would you organize and manage this together with the IPAs? Thank you.
To whom the question goes?
Panel, those who want to reply. Thanks.
So who would reply to this? Maybe James, would you reply? Because it's concerning the IPAs.
Sorry, my mind was wondering something else. I missed the question.
Can you please repeat shortly, just shortly? Obviously, we need lunch. So let's finish soon to eat something and look to the nice Bosphorus, I believe. Please, just shortly.
So in a nutshell, we've heard a lot of propositions that were very macro. But now if we really want to be serious about implementing sustainable development goals, what is the specific solution you're working on, especially the alignment between all these wonderful international organizations to actually capture value and deliver it in the end? I'd like to hear solutions, specific solutions where we can organize and manage this, this journey together. Thank you.
Okay, got it. That's for investment promotion agencies, I believe. So that's why I said at this stage, we see the challenge of higher expectation, lower level of resources. That is the dilemma that investment promotion agencies are faced with. And that's why I said the transformation, 3 actions. Narratives, we talked about that. And secondly, new strategy. And thirdly, as new institutional setup with new sets of skills. The third part is the key, how to develop new skills to attract this SDG-related investment and how to reorganize the IPAs is the key. I think one of the things is leveraging, that given the diminishing resources for IPAs, lack of skills, the only way out is leveraging with others. WIPA, as an organization, over the past year, we have observed how WIPA has been revitalized under the new leadership. And there was a time WIPA was in difficulties. I'm talking about a year and 2 years ago. So one of the key is what they have done, and Boston has said, leveraging with all of us. And that leveraging is very important, leveraging with private business development agencies, and leveraging with international organizations for training, for technical assistance, leveraging with universities for new, fresh blood. Because today, if we want to capture value, to attract the new types of investment, we need people who know sharing economy. We need people who know this digital economy, know how to deal with new industrial revolution coming up. So new generation of people from the schools and pairing with them, empowering them with the skills of investment promotion facilitation. And this is outsourcing for skills, for expertise, and internalizing them through the fresh recruitment of the cheaper labor that from schools, lower level people, and learn from the external outsourcing. So that is very, very important. So leveraging is an important thing. Secondly, as I said, have to have closer collaboration with line ministries, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Industries, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health. These are the ministries, they don't know how to promote investment. Work with them, not just getting the investment, whoever is targeting of investors outside is important. Working with the ministries in the country is more important in the context of SDGs. How to work with them and help them to prepare the pipeline project, bankable project, is one of the key success factors. There are many others, and We have our World Investment Report in 2014, and we also have the Investment Facilitation Action Manual. We just launched on our website, so you may wish to refer to that.
I will just give one very important message that our Vice President, Rufat, always says. You should promote yourself within your governmental structure. This is what James, I believe, also meant, because the other stakeholders of the government, they do not know. So now I really need to go. So I'm sorry, no questions anymore. I'm really sorry because we are running out of time. And please, we will have lunch now, 1 hour. I'm sorry to say that it was planned 1.5 hours, but we cannot manage. There were a bit longer sessions with the keynote speeches, but I believe we all got something from these speeches. I believe it was contributive to all our knowledges, so I would like to thank to our panel, and maybe we can have at least one group photo, and please, big applause. Thank you very much.